Jedi business, go back to your drinks.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. All are welcome. Young fans, old fans, thanks for joining another episode of Jedi Business. Joining me once again, Darthzartan, Paulie.
Yeah, hey, what's going on, Manny? Good to be with you again.
Yeah, how are my audio levels right now? Can you hear me okay and everything?
Yeah,
I was
everything's
messing with
good.
them earlier, so.
And I made sure I was off Wi-Fi, so.
All right, let's get into it. We got Tales of the Underworld to discuss. This is a special bonus edition of Jedi Business. Won't be as long. We're going to do a little thing first before we get into that. I was talking to you a little bit earlier about the toys that they released, and obviously you knew about it before I even mentioned it because you said you ordered them. One of the ones that just came out for the May the 4th is the Cantina Adventure set. You said you ordered that?
That one I ordered, and at first I wasn't interested in getting much of anything that they had advertised, but after as I thought about it, I said, what the heck? It's a nod to the old stuff, and then at the same time, there's a little bit of variation in the appearance, but I didn't
Yeah,
pick up
that's the original mistake version of some of the characters right there in the blue.
just the one. That's right,
Yeah.
just the one. And yeah, you're right. And I didn't pick up the other pack, but now I'm kind of wondering if I should have got it. I guess they made an announcement yesterday after all the stuff went up that come Friday that they were going to lock in prices, based on tariff assumptions with increases and everything. So basically, if you don't get your orders in on any of the product, I guess by Friday, then anything that's considered a pre-order after that date will likely go up in price.
The packaging that it's coming in, and it's got the original Kenner. It's going to come in the original Kenner packaging with the Star Wars and all that, just like it used to back in the old days. Another one that came out was the special, which I was looking at, Stormtroopers of the Empire, going from, they got the, I don't know if you've seen that, it's a 3-pack
Oh yeah.
with the
Yeah.
Snow Trooper, Sand Trooper, and then a Bike Trooper. I thought that one looked pretty neat too.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring up the figures is because limited edition sets, pre-orders, and toys that you see that are really selling that sell out, because that Cantina set sold out already. They're all either original trilogy or prequel trilogy. You do not see a lot of toys or new sets or anything. Even the Lego sets, I subscribe to the Lego because I pick up every now and then I'll pick up a set,
Hmm.
but that's all. None of that is sequel trilogy. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously you could just say, "Hey, the sequels suck," and nobody buys that
Well,
crap. But that's
well,
that's
you know
that's an
what?
important
Let's.
thing that
I mean,
nobody's buying that.
well, you can make that argument, but I also think that there's two things going on there. I think is one, there's always going to be sort of, at least with probably a lot of people over the age of 40, they have a fondness for certainly the original trilogy and probably um, prequel trilogy to some extent. The younger you go, you're going to pick up more of that audience. But a lot of the folks that are being introduced to Star Wars that are in maybe their children or their teens, and they go to the Disneyland or Disney World exhibits with the whole Star Wars Galaxy experience and all that. If they were kids in the last 5 to 10 years, that's really potentially their first exposure, unless their parents or someone introduced them to it. My point is, some of the people like me, people that are a little bit older, are going to have a little more disposable income, and they also have fonder memories of probably that particular part of the franchise. So, in other words, if you grew up in the last 10 years, you're probably not going to have a lot of disposable cash, and
Well,
more.
well, that's true, but I know where you're going with that. Because I thought that too. But here's the thing: if the sequels had, I mean, the sequels had been pretty cool, I'd be buying that stuff too. Because I'm a Star Wars fan. If it would have been good, I would have put it just on the same level as the other ones. But
Well, to
I'll,
your
I'll tell you this: I bought one sequel, and that was Luke Skywalker. I don't have
yeah.
any sequel stuff.
Well, to your point, though, it's pretty clear that after the movie merchandise was released, and this has been a few years since the last one. When was the last one released? 2018 or something like that. That's it. They really haven't released any additional sequel products. So that tells me that either they felt there just wasn't enough interest in investing in doing more of that. Those toys just didn't sell, and so it was pretty clear that they weren't going to really make their money back, right? Or a combination of things. But yeah, I mean, because since then we haven't really seen much of anything, and it's been a few years, even before COVID, probably since the last sequel toy came out. So right now we're just pretty much the always The original trilogy stuff seems to do pretty well. Prequel trilogy to a lesser extent, but again, some of those people are aging into where they have a little more disposable income, and you see that. I see a lot of requests. If you go to different groups online and stuff, people say, "Oh, release this version of Anakin or this version of." It's because that's kind of a fond time period for them. But the original trilogy has always been traditionally a pretty big hit, and on top of that. There's also the bigger debate between Black Series and vintage, right? In other words, do you prefer the old scale, which is the 3 3/4, or do you like the 6 inch scale? And that I don't know enough of the fan base to kind of make a determination as far as why one is more popular than the other.
I think they both do good because I get, I like the original size myself, but I picked up the Black Series for the Empire Strikes Back anniversary set, and when they put out I don't know if you know this, but they put out it was like a box for the original box that they had put out originally before they had. I don't know if you remember, they came out with figures before they had figures, and they were selling them in a box with,
Yes,
and they redid that for the anniversary of Star Wars,
for
and
the
I
six
picked,
inch.
yeah, with the big the Dark Series, I picked that up, and then when they came out with the Empire Strikes Back vintage series or whatever, I picked those up. So I think they both sell well, and it's original trilogy. But a question I have for you: doesn't it seem like, because I talked to Larry about this one time, I believe, and I have not been to Disneyland Star Wars stuff, but supposedly most of it, if not all of it, was all sequel trilogy based, and it's only
Right.
recently I've heard that they're bringing in some of the older stuff. Why does it seem? Do you believe the old? I'm thinking we may have talked about. Do you believe the rumor that Lucas still gets a cut of that because somehow, even though he sold
No,
it? Or why
no,
does it seem like they Disney almost doesn't like the original trilogy in
well,
a
it's
sense?
it's not so much they don't like it. I think from a business perspective. Now, granted, I'm of the mindset they should have probably done it in the original trilogy and just added elements of maybe the sequel trilogy, but they decided to do it the other way around. So I think in Disney's mind, rather than go and use all those characters, we already kind of know how those stories end. So I think they wanted to start something fresh. That's part of the reason why they decided to go into the future. In other words, with the sequel trilogy, they went, what, 20 years beyond Jedi or whatever that was. And I think for them, it was a fresh start to basically reintroduce Star Wars, but also introduce new concepts, new characters, new ideas, which basically means cash, right? In their mind, which is if we can cash in on that. Unfortunately for them, it doesn't look like that was the best business decision. I think the Galaxy's Edge is well visited. I mean, there's a lot of people going. You
Have
mentioned
you
our
have you
buddy.
gone?
Never have.
Okay,
I did
we
go.
gotta go, bro.
Good for them that they decided to move forward with basically a Star Wars land, basically. And but I think it was a big miss that they decided to put all those characters in rather than, more traditional characters. Honestly, I think that would have been more popular for more people.
Yeah, I just really feel it's a miss. I mean, like, even I hate to just continue to beat the dead horse about the sequel trilogy, but they really should have had. I mean, I think his name's Chris Gore. He's from Film Threat, and he was doing an interview one time, and maybe this is just hyperbole and first world problems, but he said it's almost cinematically criminal that we never got Han, Luke, and Leia all together on in one scene in the sequel trilogy. And I have to agree. It's like that's what even Larry, when he was talking about he didn't like the prequels as much. He was waiting for the sequels. That's what he wanted to see. And that's what everybody they had a chance to like make it all about them, introduce the new characters in the first movie, and then okay, take the second and third and go on with the new characters. It just again, it just seems like a miss. And I was like, I don't know. I it seems so weird that Disney would just not focus so much on the old guys that that's why I that's why I believe some of them conspiracy theories about why they don't.
Yeah,
But
no, I just think obviously someone was in a position to make a decision, and I don't think that was the best decision that they made. And it's pretty clear, we know for a fact now that they didn't have a plan. And when they were doing the sequel trilogy, and it was they kind of left it up to each director to do their own thing. And granted, there was supposed to be a different director for the third one, and yet they pulled back after the second one and realized there was so much backlash from a lot of the fans that they said, "Oh, this is not going to work, so we're going to have to change things up. But all that could have easily been avoided if they would have had a showrunner or someone in charge like Kevin Feige on Marvel, who basically would have steered the ship, right? And unfortunately, you had three different captains potentially, and or more, and it wasn't sort of one cohesive direction. So as a result, the whole property suffered for it, in my opinion.
Let's move on to Star Wars Tales of the Underworld, which is very similar to the Tales of the Jedi. And there was what was the other one? Tales of something? I
Tales of
forgot.
the Empire.
Tales of the Empire, which I thought were both just fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What did you think coming into it? Did you know that it was going to be split between Ventress and Cad Bane, or
Not initially, but I did just a quick search kind of because I was curious to see what the length of the episodes were because I had a busy day yesterday. I watched this yesterday. So I kind of wanted to see what I was getting into. And in it, obviously, they discussed there's basically two story arcs. So that kind of established what I was expecting. But before then, I didn't really have a good idea what it was going to be.
all right? Well, let's split them then. First three. What did you think overall, and your thoughts on the first three episodes? That little story on Ventress, and I believe his name's Lycos or whatever.
Yeah, of the two, I actually enjoyed this story arc more, and it probably just has more to do with the fact I've just never really been a huge follower or fan of Cad Bane, but that doesn't mean I hated it. I just of the two, I preferred the Ventress story, and she, I know she was introduced in the Clone Wars. I At some point I thought she had been killed, and then the Night Sisters had brought her back, and then as this show opens, though, you see that I guess she was killed yet again, and then
No,
or
no.
maybe
Basically, how it goes is because yes, we knew she died, but she died in a book called Dark Disciple. But then she appeared in the Bad Batch. For the longest time, it was unexplained, and so this basically explains how she came back to be in the Bad Batch and still alive now. In Dark Disciple, just to put it in a nutshell, it's takes place during the Clone Wars. The Jedi realize that Count Dooku he needs to go, but putting a hit on a Jedi really isn't their way. But Quinlan Voss, they task him to find Ventress because by then she had been booted off by Dooku, hook up together and kill Dooku. Basically, that's the plan. But along the way, they fall in love. Ventress and Quinlan Voss. Then she finds out that he just he really came to her originally because he wanted her to help him kill Dooku. And then it's drama. And it's anyway, she's killed in that book. So it kind of like this story picks up right near the end of that, I suppose.
so correct me if I'm wrong though, just so we are on the same page. She was killed in the show, in the Clone Wars
No,
show.
no,
No,
I
no,
don't
she
I don't think she was ever killed in the show. No.
okay, but she was in the book, and this is what we're seeing, which is her rebirth after that.
Exactly.
Okay, okay. No, to me it was interesting. I kind of was wishing it. I know we're fast forwarding to the end of that arc of those three episodes, but I was kind of wishing that the kid in the end had gone on the ship so that I could see her do other things. But
Well,
see,
that brings me up to what I was going to bring up. You think Disney's starting to get a little too formulaic with their storyline? I mean, we got almost every series getting a master come along with some side character. For example, you got Din Djarin coming up with Baby Yoda. It's like a mentor
yeah.
type. Even in the Bad Batch with Omega, and then now this. It just seems like I don't know. If it had been one or two, maybe, but it seems like three in a row.
Well, just think about it. You got Ahsoka too.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you think it's getting a little formulaic or just whatever?
Well, I mean, you could argue that. I think that's probably a valid case to make, but I think it's also, well, I was going to kind of knock it and say, well, it's just another Jedi Sith story, but I guess if it's something I did always want to see, and if that's where some of this may be going, then I'm good with it. But this idea of what happened in those years between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, right? In other words, in that gap of almost 20 years, there certainly was a purge, of Jedi. So if we see some of those characters, but then this also confuses me. So who's the guy that they introduced in the first episode of those three, right? It's like some other. I thought, oh, is this an Inquisitor? Doesn't look like it. So I mean, who
Wait,
is
wait,
he?
wait.
Where did he?
Which guy?
So the one
Wait,
that
wait,
says,
wait. Before we deep dive, let me just give you my overview real quick. I think, I think as I was watching this show, I think the Star Wars fan haters are just out of their mind right now. But we are in a rebirth, a great time to be a Star Wars fan. I mean, look what we got. We just got Skeleton Crew, which was pretty good. You get the re-release 20th anniversary. We get this. You got the Mandalorian movie coming up, which is look exciting. Ahsoka, we got these toys, that Cantina set that's freaking awesome, and I missed out on it. You know what I'm saying? It's not actually that bad. I mean,
Well,
Andor's killing it. It
so
just
let's
there's some great stuff out there.
well
I thought this was great.
again, you and I grew up in a time where here's what the best they had to offer. After Return of the Jedi, there was a little bit of a lull, and then about a year later, what comes up? Droids and the Ewoks, the animated show. And I have since I just can't sit through. Honestly, Droids was hard enough to sit through at my age trying to watch it again, thinking, okay, what I'm remembering are good memories of that time in terms of it's sort of looking at it through beer goggles, right? You kind of think of a bit rosier time, but it's not great. And
Well,
certainly,
I'll be honest. I think I may watch a few episodes, more so of Droids, but I don't remember. I don't remember watching those. I mean, it was even for me at that time. It was too kiddie. It was definitely meant for a younger audience.
well, yeah, yeah, but it was the only Star Wars thing we had until the two Ewok TV movies, and even you look at those, and they're a little. You have to kind of grimace a little bit.
I enjoyed those, but you're right. They were definitely, you've made the point. I think last two podcasts is there definitely was a shift in tone after Return of the Jedi.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
yeah, but I really enjoyed this Tales of the Underworld. But let's deep
Well,
dive. Okay, so
yeah,
it picks up into a couple of good questions. When she is killed, she's put in. I'm assuming that she's back on Dathomir, back on
yeah,
her home planet,
yeah.
and she's put into that liquid. We don't we don't really know how the witches tune into the Force. Obviously
Right,
they're Force users, but they're using it a separate way. So it just shows, because remember in Ahsoka when we see other witches, they have those dead clone troopers, so they obviously
right,
have a way to bring people back, even
right.
though Ventress keeps her mind as opposed to those ones. But what did you think about that, having her come back? I mean, I guess it could have just be considered a retcon because they killed her in a book and they didn't really want to do that in the TV series. But
Well, and
I thought it worked out pretty good.
it's already been established. I mean, they did this with to a different extent. They did this with Maul right in the show in the Clone Wars
Yeah.
series. So they, even though he wasn't dead, I mean, he was out of his mind, and so they brought him back to reality with their magic in a sense, or their use of the Force. But um, no, I'm fine with that. It's a sci-fi fantasy element, and I'm good with that. But I guess what I was wondering. So I just pulled it up on the video here. I went to Disney Plus. The character I'm talking about was introduced at about the 12-minute mark of that first episode. I don't know what. Now that I slow it down or I freeze the frame, and it does look like he could be an Inquisitor. It
You're
just,
talking about the one they fought.
yes.
Yeah, that's an Inquisitor. Yeah, that's
I
an
guess his uniform did looked a little bit different for me, but then now that I've seen the freeze frame,
it's a new Inquisitor.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's what it is. So
And actually, I got the picture up on our on our stream here. But here's the deal. One thing you got to realize is that where in the timeline this takes place, if you notice, they mention it later. They're still talking about the kind of what they call them, the Venture class starships.
right.
They're not, even though it's Empire and the Clone Wars are over and they're switched to stormtroopers. They haven't yet become Star Destroyers. Although that thing that they're running on, that they cut loose and they're running as it's turning, that's, if you look at it closely, that is actually a piece of a Star Destroyer. So that shipyard is building Star Destroyers as opposed to the
Yeah,
uh
no, that's a good point. As I'm
so it's
seeing
actually,
more,
it's early in the Empire, which is why this would be one of the first Inquisitors, someone we hadn't
well,
met yet.
a show like this, yes, or at least hasn't been. I would say the Inquisitor core, for lack of a better term, has not been fully fleshed out. So as I'm seeing this a little bit better now, of course he has this spinning double-edged blade and all that business. So I think you're right. I think what this is sort of during a transition period of the Empire, right? They're moving from the Venator class to the traditional Imperial Star
Yes, yes,
Destroyers,
yes, yes.
and they're probably just ramping up the program with Inquisitors. So you're just going to see early examples of whether they're aliens or former Jedi that are now hunting the Jedi. In this case, he happened upon her, or he was looking for the kid, finds him and her, and then the rest
Yeah.
is picks up from there. What I did like, not only did I like, do I like her over Cad Bane as far as characters that I have an interest in, but I thought that last episode was pretty interesting where I had to laugh when she made that joke. The kid goes, "Oh, look, there's battle droids," and she goes, "Yeah, as useful as they always are." In other words, right? They weren't very effective to begin with, but
Yeah.
here they are, just rusted out hulks of metal. Um, but the whole story I thought was interesting in the fact that it's kind of like the old stories you'd see here on a show, maybe a western, or even
Oh my
you know
gosh, that's another thing I was gonna bring up. The freaking music, bro. The music isn't. I mean, go back and watch it if you get a chance, and just focus on the music. Music's incredible. It almost has this, like you say, this motif of the western, and not that it's western music. It's almost like a samurai. It has a very
well,
old
you,
school samurai type,
we
crouching
we've
tiger type thing. If you
yeah,
listen to it, and it
we've
has
seen
that vibe.
we've seen that in a lot of material from Star Wars, right? It's a
Yeah, even the
combination of
even the
East and
beginning of
West.
Mandalorian, it had that vibe.
Right. And so when I'm seeing this episode, though, why I say more of a Western where they talk, there's the music and the look of it, but also this idea that here's this guy, he's a former separatist. He recognizes her as, "Hey, I remember you. You were one of us, one of the quote unquote good guys, right?" And
Yeah,
then she's like,
almost like she's running upon an old rebel general.
Bingo, like a Confederate, right?
Yeah,
That's kind of what I
Confederate.
thought. Yeah, and well, of course, they were called the Confederacy of Independent, systems. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a take on that as well. But I thought that's interesting, right? We don't always see that sort of take on characters. We always see, oh, you're a former, usually on the other side, but now you see the separatist, former separatist, because she notices all of his medals. But I thought that was an interesting story, right? They go get the water, come to find out they're not being attacked from raiders. They're being attacked from folks that actually they believe that's their water source, and that the other folks are stealing their water. And I thought it's a good episode in terms of kind of explaining and sort of displaying sort of the best aspects of what a Jedi is, right? And the kid understood the language, but we've seen how Jedi pick up different languages, or at least get kind of an understanding of what the native species is trying to communicate. So I like that, and that's just maybe me, but I think that's kind of what I liked. Um,
And
as
how many times in real life does that probably happen where you're fighting over something and it's just a misunderstanding of either culture or language? You know what I'm saying? Or it's like where
Yeah,
they gonna talk, hey, let's work it out. Maybe we can have such and such amount of water. We don't mean to steal it. But that goes to almost anything where like you say, it's just a misunderstanding. And
that's right. That's right. No, I think I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, things like that happen. Things have happened that way, not just today, but over the course of history, right? Where someone says, "Well, that's our area," and then someone says, "No, that's ours." No, it's different than someone blatantly going in and said, "We're taking control of this one way or the other." But it's another thing to say, "Hey, that maybe we didn't take into consideration this was their property or this territory theirs first, and try and work out a deal."
what did you think about her during that fight with the Inquisitor? That she didn't just kick his ass. Do you think? Okay, it could be a couple of reasons. Do you think she lost some of her ability from the death and rebirth, or has just she's
Mm,
been so out of step from fighting for so long, or was the Inquisitor just that badass? You know what? I because I just
y-
felt because she actually didn't beat him.
right.
It was Lycos that ended up coming in and double lightsabering him. So I
W-
don't know. She should have beat him a lot
Well,
easier.
I didn't think about your first suggestion, which was maybe with her coming back or resurrected, that somehow she lost a step. That's possible. But certainly those other scenarios or other variables are possible too, which is maybe this guy was better than her. Maybe she had kind of lost a step just besides the sort of rebirth process. Maybe she just, she's not out there swinging at people every day. So maybe she had kind of taken a step back. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I really liked how they set it up, like the character, and I think they really did over the 3 episodes. They really did a good job of setting up him not trusting her to then him finding out she's Ventress it was assassin for Dooku
so,
to slowly beginning to trust. So when they get to that planet at the end, and they fight, they they have that one scene and they almost like look like a master and apprentice with the way they have their lightsabers and ready to fight, where they're actually teaming up. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, the only thing I can draw from that, because that would take experience or practice, is she probably did some of that with Dooku, even though I don't remember ever seeing it. And certainly the kid would have trained with his Jedi master to probably do that. So, I mean, obviously, both of them would have to have some familiarity with that. Just on a side note, I kind of like we've seen with these little vignettes, these little one offs, or I should say, these little specials that they do once a year now. I was kind of hoping that Tales of the Jedi would continue like the old. There was both a book series by Kevin J. Anderson as well as a comic series by, I think, different writers.
Oh yeah, I have those. I have all of
Yeah,
those. Yeah.
and I wish they would delve more into different parts of the sort of Jedi storyline. In other words, I don't necessarily need to see a whole TV series. I don't need to see a whole new movie about that because I know that gets a little old too for people. I mean, you want to see other aspects, like we're seeing with Andor, really little to no influence from Jedi and Sith directly, right? So I think they should do more of this, like little vignettes, little one-offs and things like that kind of give more background on not just maybe not just characters that we're familiar with, but maybe new and different characters, or perhaps this would be a perfect opportunity for them to go and say, here's, three different characters maybe in the next three episodes they do if they decide to go back to Tales of the Jedi and say, maybe Vader's hunting them or Inquisitors are in terms of where the purge kind of happened. I think some people always wondered whatever happened to this Jedi, or we know this one survived. Show us how they survived, or something like that.
Well, I 100% agree, and we were actually talking about it sort of the same thing with Marvel with when I mentioned how good the Werewolf by Night one off was up, and you
Right.
said, yeah, maybe they should do some other little one offs like that. And I agree with that with Star Wars, and plus the quality in these, both the animation, the stories, and the music for Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, and then this one, I think they're just perfect. But just to wrap up the first three episodes, where do you think this leads? Because you said he didn't go to the path, although that side thing, the path, that was mentioned in Obi-Wan too.
Right.
And I think
Right.
even Quinlan Voss's name was mentioned in there.
Right.
But anyway, so that may be something they're setting up for the future also.
I would
Um,
like to see that. Like I said, I've also wanted to have, I would have preferred to just have the kid out of the picture only because I think there's other stories to tell with her character. But okay, that's fine. Maybe we see him again. Maybe we don't. I don't
do
know.
you think, because it's one of Filoni's characters, there's rumors that we're probably going to see her pop up either in the Mandalorian movie or Ahsoka season 2, and that one of the reasons why they wanted to do it is to set up the retcon of why she's still alive. And I don't know. Do you think we're going to see her anything like that? Possibly.
Anything's possible, especially with Filoni. He seems to be including a combination of not just Legends material, but also his own sort of like look at Ahsoka. That was a
Yep.
character that he brought full forward. Not just in animation. He introduced her, developed the character, but then later has her own show, right? And she's appeared in one or two other of the series as well. So, um, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Let me ask you this though before we move on. Ventress, is she? What is the latest in the timeline that we've seen her? It's just prior to episode, well, Star Wars and New Hope, right? It's basically just prior to that is what we've seen her in so far.
I don't think she makes it, although there's nothing there, but I don't think we've seen her anything past that, past BBY1, anything like
Right,
that.
right. Okay,
Or
okay.
even that late. I would assume that she doesn't make it somehow, but there's nothing,
So
because
the
even
the last
even Ahsoka's not, well, actually she is, huh? Ahsoka is still around. Never mind.
the
But yeah,
last thing that we've seen her in chronologically as far as moving through time was probably the Bad Batch then, right? In terms of as
yes.
far as we've seen her, which is probably about maybe well, that's about maybe 15 years out, isn't it? Or 20 years from A New Hope still?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure.
Yeah. So it's in that time frame though, post Sith.
But we definitely haven't seen her after. So,
Right.
but
Right.
again, if she shows up in Mandalorian or Ahsoka, then that will be the most recent. Although they'll
Yeah.
have a lot explained, 'cause she'd be a lot older.
Right.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which was the Cad Bane. And I know you said, I'll be honest with you, I never liked Cad Bane originally when I was watching him in Clone Wars, but he's grown over me a lot, especially when we got to see him in Boba Fett. I kind of wish he hadn't been killed there, but
Did he
Yeah,
though?
so
I mean, it's not.
yeah, who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but so yeah, he had grown on me. I actually, between me and you, I saw the trailer, so I knew he was in this show, but I had no idea this was his story. When
Right, right. Neither
in
did I.
fact, when they first showed the kids, and the guy comes out and, like, and gives them the coin. Uh, let's see the kids. Let me put this up on the picture. They show the boys, which is Colby and Nero, I believe.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like that whole dynamic. I actually thought that was Cad Bane at first until they mentioned his name. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right,
And
right.
because he's working with, looks like it's Bosk or somebody like that. So I thought that was Cad Bane, but so they set it up with the two boys, and I thought that first episode was incredible. That he ended up having to leave his friend behind and all that. You know, what did you think of that first episode?
Yeah, I think again, I never hated the character, but he wasn't one of my favorites, right? In other
Even
words, I had a.
even beyond Cad Bane, just the episode itself. The
Oh yeah,
episode,
yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's a story that we've seen told in other franchises, right? This idea that the kids start out one way, he gets separated. It's sort of a, instead of a hero's journey, it's obviously a criminal's journey. He kind of goes, but he had to make decisions based on the circumstances. The kid didn't have much to begin with, and I thought that was interesting, right? It was the whole setup where they were both kids. Now, obviously, I don't know if it was ever established that they were orphans, but they certainly were on the run or living off the street, right? So,
yeah,
yeah, no, I was fine.
it's like the Star Wars version of Blood In, Blood Out. One becomes
There
a
you go.
criminal,
There you
one
go.
becomes a cop. Okay, so then we go on to the next episode, and they're older. This is one thing I didn't like. I of this, overall I liked it, but I didn't like it as much as the first three because I thought they dealt with Ventress and Lyco's story. It seemed to go. It seemed to flow pretty well from them not trusting each other until them becoming quote unquote friends. But I think obviously they had to do a time skip because they're trying to switch from they're basically showing Cad
Right.
Bane as a child. But I thought they jumped too much, and suddenly they come back, and he comes back and he knows his friend's there, and he hugs them, and like there was no, oh, what happened, and you know what I'm saying. It seemed like
Well,
it
and
jumped too much and too fast, and they didn't explain enough.
no,
I wish
that's
they had it
fair.
more.
That's fair. And another point that I thought might have maybe ended up, it could have ended up a few different ways, but I was right in the fact that I knew that was going to be an issue or a plot point was the female Nemoidian, right? Which was um, basically the female of his species, because you remember the bad guy, or I should say the leader of that gang was also Nemoidian, who was wearing the hat. That obviously is kind of to me a kind of an homage with Indy, right?
Yep,
He inherits the hat like just
inherits the
like Indy
hat.
did. Yeah. So, but that older with the female that was introduced in that second episode, I'm like, well, who's this? Where'd she come from? But I realized it's hard to tell with age, but I guess she was and he were about the same age roughly. But I'm like, okay, that's going to be interesting because I know generally when you do something like that, you know that could potentially impact the plot in some way. Or
I missed that whole. I mean, I understood it, but I kind of missed that whole plot point until I rewatched it because basically she tells Cad Bane not to go because there's more to live to. Because basically she's pregnant with this kid. That's Cad
whoa,
Bane's.
wait.
Okay, so you missed it too.
No, are you
Yes. Okay.
serious?
Okay. So here's the you got to rewatch it. I completely missed this the whole first time. The subtle. This is another thing. What pisses me off is because it went so fast. These this that you missed that they didn't delve into it. So here's the story. She's basically one of the criminals too.
Yeah,
She's with Cad Bane. She's telling him not to go because she's pregnant with his kid. Okay, so when they go out there and she gets shot, right?
but he
Uh
doesn't know that. He
no,
doesn't
he
know
doesn't
this.
know. He doesn't know that. He never. He doesn't. This is what's crazy. So she gets shot, and of course gives up Cad Bane's gun so that he gets taken in, right?
Uh huh.
So what happened is Nero, his friend, ends up hooking up with Cad Bane's girl in the story. They hook up together, and they end up having a child, but the child is Cad Bane's. It's not Nero's kid.
Now,
So that's what.
wait. Well, how do you surmise that? She never said anything, right?
She starts to say it, and at the end, because blue makes blue, blue and green don't make blue.
Well, wait, because
Okay, wait, listen.
wait. I just froze it now. I just as soon as you were saying the colors, I just froze it as out of curiosity. So his friend, who's now a marshal,
Yeah,
or deputy
Nero.
marshal,
That's Nero. He
he
becomes
is
the new marshal after Cad Bane kills the old marshal.
he is green.
He is green.
Cad
He
is blue,
Cat is blue. He
and
hooks up.
the
Go ahead.
girlfriend is also green.
Right. So green and green wouldn't make blue because the kid is blue.
Oh, wait
So
a second. I see what you're saying. Hold on. I'm. Go ahead, keep talking, but I'm
so
not making.
anyways, this is the subtle plot point in the background, which gets missed because they go so fast over it. They could have delved a little bit more. But anyway, so basically Nero, his friend, hooks up takes they become lovers with Cad Bane's wife because he's in prison, and they end up having a kid, and she ends up dying, a few years
Right,
later.
right.
Not because of the gunshot, but for whatever reason she died.
Broken heart, like Padme.
And then the kid, which is Isaac, the kid is Isaac, he calls Nero Papa. But if you see at the end when they go, I think Nero tells him that basically in some of his words he tells him that's his son. I don't know exactly how he says it, but that's Cad Bane's son, and then he just walks away from the kid.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's Cad Bane's kid.
Okay, so the
You got to rewatch it. I'm telling you,
uh,
I completely missed. I saw certain things like the kid, but it didn't click with me until I rewatched it
well,
the
what
second
made you? I'm
time.
just curious. What is it? Just because you normally would rewatch something, or what made
Yeah,
you think, oh,
I rewatched it again, just like right. I mean, literally, that's what I was doing when we talked. I was
okay,
rewatching it,
okay, wow, okay. Well, that
but
certainly adds another element to it,
so
doesn't
yeah,
it?
it added another element because, but see, I don't think before he shoots his friend, I don't think he knows that. Which see, that's what I'm saying. They could have delved it with it. Let me put this up on the screen. Their fight, that's classic Western motif. When he comes out and high noon, 12 paces or whatever that that whole scene. But yeah, he never reveals uh that he ended up hooking up with the girl, but I don't know. You got to rewatch it because yeah, that's Cad Bane's kid. It looks just like him.
Wow,
Green and green
wow.
don't make blue.
Well, I see, and I wasn't sure about that because I didn't realize the species had multiple colors, or at least two different colors, from what I can tell. So I just assumed you could be born of either color. It doesn't necessarily mean it had to be a mix. But I don't know. Now that you mention it, that kind of clears that up if that's in fact the case.
Well, rewatch it. At least rewatch that last episode.
Okay. Is it
But
at the
yeah,
very end when he's dying and then he
just
says
just
some?
just rewatch the whole last episode because it really takes with before the plot point is introduced before they go off, and he's saying I gotta go, and she's like you don't have to go, you have more to live for, which is she didn't tell him, but she's basically pregnant at that time, and then he ends up going anyways, and remember she shows up, and that's where she gets shot and blah blah blah, and then she takes his gun and he gets arrested and all that.
Yeah, I'm watching it right now. So no, now it's interesting because obviously that just adds another layer. But I mean, as far as the story, I mean, it was a good story, right? It's the whole, you grow up, you think you know someone, and then obviously people, you grow into who you're going to be as an adult, and sometimes you're on the same team, and sometimes you're not, And in this case, obviously they were on both different sides of the law, and we see what happens in the last episode.
Yeah, but well, that's my only thing. I rate this a little bit less is because two things. One, I didn't like the jump skip so far
Yeah.
without more explanation, and two, that whole kid plot point. It completely they didn't explain it enough, or it wasn't obvious enough. I don't like when things are spelled out for me 100%, but it should have been a little bit more clear because,
Well,
like I
I think
said, I didn't catch it,
if
and
that was the
that's the only
case,
reason why.
No. I'm with you. I think you don't need everything spelled out, but what it does is it adds a different sort of level of tension or a level of interest,
Yeah, it
right?
was.
If you're watching the story, you're like,
I
well,
liked it more
okay,
the second time. Yeah, I thought
right.
I enjoyed it. Overall, both these I loved it. I wish there was more. Uh, I'm not. Like I said, originally I wasn't the biggest Cad Bane guy, but I've grown into him. I actually enjoyed that story. I'd like to see more of the Underworld, more adventurous. I'm down. But then again, I wanted more Tales of the Jedi. I think there's more to show with Dooku. And
Well,
stuff like that.
basically, they're releasing them now on May 4th, so we're going to see what happens next time around. If it's a return to Tales of the Jedi, or if it's something else altogether. But interesting. Okay, well, I'll keep that in mind for this show. And then, yeah, I'm kind of looking forward. I wish they would do more of these because, I heard that from, I don't know, watching these. How do you make a movie kind of thing, or how do watching directors on the actors inside the actor studio and stuff. And you hear different things about making a shorter production, like a short film or something like this, versus a 2 or 3 hour film. They're different skill sets in a way. Yeah, you got to have the basics, as far as directing and that sort. But to tell a story in 12 minutes or three little mini things, as opposed to a larger series like or a movie, a full 3 hour movie or 2.5 hour movie, it's different, right? And so you really have.
Sometimes I might think it's even harder. I mean, yeah, you could do the introduction, problem, and then resolution episodes. But I'm just saying to fit all that in, and the dialogue and the story, and have it be so well done in such a short. I mean, like you were telling me, they show what they're like 15 minutes, 13 minutes, but really they're like 9, 10 minutes with the
Yeah,
credits.
they're not very long.
They're short, and it's like it just seemed to last, and it was I don't know. I really it just goes back to what I was saying with Andor 20th anniversary, just had Skeleton Crew, we got Mandalorian coming. It's a good time to be a Star Wars fan right now.
Yeah,
Per per to me.
yeah, well, that's kind of where I was going with the whole Ewoks and droids thing after Jedi, which is, hey man, we were there during the lean times, right? I mean, there was really nothing until the Zahn books, and then it took another few years before we saw Episode One or the Phantom Menace. That's a long time. It was almost 20 years, between movies. And so you're right. We're in a real good time as far as the material that's out there. That's why, yeah, I don't like everything because someone asked me after Disney bought it, oh, you think they're going to basically Disneyfy it and, it's going to get kind of turn kid friendly. I said, at that time, things were kind of skewing in a direction where I thought Disney might allow creators to kind of do some of their own thing, and we've seen that. And so I like overall what I've seen. Granted, I could, say there's a few things I don't like. You could say that about everything, but it's the same thing with Marvel. I think on the whole, I like what I've seen. I can always critique or nitpick certain things about a film or about the franchise, but overall, I think we're still in a golden period for both of those type of franchises.
Yeah, especially what there's specific points in Star Wars timeline where it's a big change, and you just got to admit that after post the Last Jedi, there was definitely a difference in how the Star Wars fandom was. I definitely cracked the Star Wars fandom, and post that, I think this is the best time we've had, because you're right. I haven't liked everything either. Everything hasn't been good. Even if I liked it, it wasn't like the best. Like Obi-Wan, I was disappointed. Boba Fett, there's some really good moments, but overall, I was disappointed in that. But yeah, I think for this time, right now we're pretty good considering where we've been. Post Last Jedi, I think it's in a good spot. Even with the acolyte, yeah, they took a swing and a miss, in my opinion. Uh, I enjoyed watching it while we watch it. Would I rewatched it or gone back to it? No.
Right, right,
Whereas like Tales of the Jedi is definitely something I enjoyed rewatching. I'm gonna go back see, and when Andor two, we finished Andor, I'm gonna go back and rewatch this first season, rewatch the second season, and then go back into Rogue One. You know what I'm
right,
saying?
right.
So yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think all in all, especially knowing what we've had over the course of our lives to watch, and both for superhero type stuff as well as Star Wars related, we're really still in a nice sort of space as far as a golden period, as far as producing good stuff overall, quality entertainment. And yeah, you're not going to like everything. That's just the way it works. But hey, could be a lot worse. That's for sure.
Alrighty, Polly. Well, I got dinner waiting, and So I'm going to get going, and thank you for being here. We'll wrap this up again. Go ahead if you get a chance, rewatch that last episode. And maybe I'm insane. Maybe I'm completely missing the boat on that Cadman child. But check it out. Tell me what you think. Well,
All right.
we can talk about it next week. But anyways, thanks for joining, and have a good week. And we'll talk this week, I'm sure.
All right. You too. Take care.
All right, for everybody else, thanks again. I got to still edit the last episode, but hopefully I'll get both these up this week. And again, subscribe, like, comment, and I will see you next week with Darthzartan. All right, bye.